Chapter 13, Formatting a Worksheet. In the last chapter, one of the assignments that I gave you guys was to create a worksheet that was basically like a family budget. You had a section for net income for 6 months, January through June 2015. You had a section for total expenses, and then you had a section for disposable cash, which was basically what was left. And you'll notice in this particular example, what I did is I chose January through June 2015, my paycheck, my wife's paycheck, side business, net income. So basically, put in some fictitious numbers here for my paycheck, for my wife's paycheck. Our side business, as you can see, paychecks are generally going to be about the same every month. Side businesses, things like that, they may fluctuate. And then I did a sum where I'm summing B2 through B4, a range of sales. So it would basically sum up everything above it. Once that sum was calculated, I did that for each one of the others. I used drag and fill, like that, which basically took that same formula and copied it to every one. So now I have my income section created. For the expenses section, your mortgage generally is the same thing every month. Your power bill is going to fluctuate. Hotter months, your power bill may be a little bit more. Your water bill generally will fluctuate. Grocery bill may fluctuate if you have kids in school or if you're having parties and so forth. Internet bill, probably about the same. Car payments, about the same, and so forth. So again, just like above, I've created all these fictitious expenses, and then I sum them to a total expenses. Sum of B7 through B13. Again, copying and pasting that to all the different sections, all the different cells there. Now, to create this disposable cash section down here, I want it to be such that if my paycheck were to change up here, notice not only does it change my net income, but it also changes my disposable cash, which is really neat. I want the Excel document, the spreadsheet, to calculate all of my numbers rather than me having to manually type them in. So with that being said, I've saved it as myfamilybudget.xlsx. With that being said, this disposable cash is basically my total income minus my total expenses. So that is equals to B5 minus B14. And again, I copy and pasted that through all the other cells. Now this document, this spreadsheet, is not very well organized. It's not very pretty. It's just kind of a basic spreadsheet. The only thing that I did do is, by default, the column A was a little too narrow. So I adjusted the width of that. And likewise, if I had other columns that were too narrow, I could adjust their width to be the same. I don't have any negative numbers. As a matter of fact, let me go in and make a few changes here. Let's say that this month I spent a little extra on my side business. This month I spent a little extra on my side business. I'd like for those negative numbers to show up in red with parentheses around them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight every one of my numbers all the way from the very beginning to the very end, and I'm going to format. If I right click and choose format cells, that's going to give me the opportunity to format my cells. I'm going to format them as numbers so that red with parentheses around them would light up for negative numbers. So now you'll notice not only does every number have 2 decimal places, which is pretty standard, but those 2 negative numbers actually show up as red numbers with parentheses around them. Now I'd like for these not only to have 2 decimal places, but to also be dollar values. So I'm going to use, up here in the top, you'll see this little dollar symbol. When I click on that, it changes my formatting to be accounting numbers format. So I click on that. Boom, there it is. Now that also takes away, it puts the dollar sign, it puts the commas, the separators, the 2-digit, but at the same time you'll notice my red numbers have gone back to black. So I'm going to highlight that, I'm going to change that one more time. So I'm in accounting. I'd like for those to be, oh wait a minute, now we can't do that. If I choose the currency type, it'll let me do that. So now I have red numbers that are negative. Now while choosing the accounting numbers format made it all nice and pretty with the dollar signs, I had to go back in once more. I had to go back in and format those cells to be currency so that I could get that red showing up like I wanted it to. Now, I'd like for the income and expenses category to be bold and each month to be underlined. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight all of these and click bold, highlight all of my months, make them underline. And now I'd like to add a border around all of my income, a separate border around my expenses, and a separate border around my disposable cash, so it's a little bit easier for me to see. It's easier for them to show up in separate pieces. So I'm going to highlight all of my income and use this little border tool to create and I'll do just a standard outside border. Likewise for these. And last but not least, my disposable cash. And now I have this nice pretty little border around everything. If for some reason I wanted my border color to be different, then certainly I could highlight that again, come in here and change my line color or my line style. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to make my income have a black line color, my expenses to use a red, and then my disposable cash, I'll leave it as black as well. So you can see you can make a lot of changes. You can change the thickness of the line and so forth and so on. But basically, those few formatting things that I just did will help make your document look a lot better. Something something else you may want to do, and it's not part of the next assignment, but something you may want to do would be to take your months and make them centered or make them right justified. I personally like center. You may want to highlight your entire document or your entire spreadsheet and put a thick border around the outside of that. So you could do that as well. I'm not a big fan of that, but you could do it. You may want to make each one of these cells just a little bit wider. Now, if you'll notice the width of this cell, if I right click, column width, I'm going to round that up to 14 and basically copy and paste that to all of the others. I'm going to set their column width to be 14 as well. Makes it a little bit easier to read. It's a little bit more spread out, it's a little bit easier to read. My disposable cash is kind of falling in. It's kind of like I've got the income, the expenses. Disposable cash is a little tough to read, so I'm going to fill that in yellow. It's a little bit easier. It kind of stands out a little bit more. So there's a lot of other things that you can do. You can even go so far as to apply a style to whatever document it is that you're working with. And now you notice right now all I'm doing is hovering. I'm hovering over that so that it's a little easier for you guys to see. But I can apply basically any style that I wish to my document. So if I want green, I can have green, so forth and so on. That's completely up to you, whatever it is that you're into. If you want to do that, you can do that. You can likewise set background colors. So there's a lot of different options that you have as far as how you want your spreadsheet to look. And there's even so far as to going and creating a chart. Now in this particular instance, I have certain amounts of income, certain amounts of expenses that I'd like to work with. So I'm going to create a chart. I'm going to highlight all of my income and expenses, and I'm going to create a chart. So if I come up here, excuse me, if I come in and I want to insert a chart. Now they have recommended charts, but I'm going to insert a pie chart. I want a standard 2D pie chart. And instead of doing my income and expenses, I'm only going to do my expenses. I'm going to create a pie chart that basically shows all of my expenses. And when I take this chart, I'm going to make it a little bit larger so it's easier to read. I can come into the chart and actually adjust the coloring. Here in this case, it's showing me the percentages. I can show it as kind of an opaque view. Likewise, and it really doesn't matter, you can even do straight line drawing. It really doesn't matter how you view it. The key asset to this is that I'm able to see a graphical representation instead of a numeric representation. It is way easier for the average person to view a graphic than it would be to view just straight numbers. So now that I have this, I can double click on the chart itself, and over on the right pops out the fill. I can change the fill. I can change the border, change the shadowing and the edging. Those are just a few of the ones that I have. If I don't like the chart title, I can call this January expenses. If I don't like the legend over here on the side, I can change that. And I'm going to put the legend across the top. And instead of showing just numbers, you'll notice I only highlighted the numbers. So it doesn't understand what is what. Let me show you one quick thing. I'm going to delete that chart altogether. I'm going to try this. I'm going to highlight not only the numbers but the expenses themselves, where I'm highlighting the actual types of expense. Then I'm going to create another chart, and you'll notice in this example it actually highlights and tells what each expense is. So for example, let me adjust this and click here. You'll notice now I know blue is mortgage. I know total expenses is 50%, which I shouldn't have highlighted total expenses. I shouldn't have highlighted the total amount. I should have just highlighted the others like this. I can do a 3D chart. If I so choose, I can do a 3D chart. So I have a lot of different options. And when it comes to your charting, you can really make it look as neat, as different. You can basically let show whatever you want it to show. In this case, I can easily quickly view this and see that the mortgage is the largest part of my expenses, groceries and car payment number 2, car payment number 1, pretty much the big ones as well. I can easily look. Now granted, these expenses are basic things. The average household is probably going to have twice as many expenses, and so a graphical representation makes that a lot easier to see. On this particular assignment, I did not ask you to create a chart because there are so many options, but I did ask you, once you were finished with your formatting, to please save it as My Family Budget Formatted. So I'm going to come up here, File, Save As, browse to my location and say My Family Budget Formatted .xlsx. Thank you again.